Hello and welcome to Flutter Scotland. We're back again for another meetup. We're again trying out another platform for streaming. It wouldn't be Flutter Scotland if we didn't try another one. I'm just going to move us on to the welcome. So we've got some really good talks today. We've got some GDEs that we have that are going to be doing 2 talks. I'll just move us on to the kind of a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So, as you know, we've got a code of conduct, which can be summarized as be nice and be respectful. The only things that we don't the only things that we don't want to see is any rude or offensive or spamming the channel. Any type of harassment is also not to be allowed, and you'll be removed from the chat if that happens. So we have our state management extravaganza meetup today, and we've got our 2 talks. So we have Majid, who you'll probably have heard of if you've been in the Flutter community. And we also have Carlo, who you'll also have seen in the Flutter community. So they're going to be doing 2 talks that we have for state management. And then we will have a little bit at the end of the event just to talk about what the next meetup is going to be. So I'm just going to bring on stage Majid, and we can start to move on to the next part. Cool.
Hello.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm very, very good and excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you. It's great having such an amazing speaker set for this event. Also looking
Such
forward.
a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, really looking forward to Flutter Vikings as well. If anyone doesn't know, there's a great event that will be happening in Oslo in the next couple of months, and Majid is he's a big organizer for that event. So hopefully some other people can make it along.
Yes, I'm looking forward to meeting everyone, like for Flutter Vikings, hopefully in person in Oslo, Norway, the 31st of August, 1st of September. I'm really looking forward to meeting you all. Everyone is welcome.
Excellent. I'll get your slides up and we can start the talk.
Sure. Let's talk about the state management, like perhaps the most controversial topic, not just in Flutter world, but perhaps in all um, application development, let's say, ecosystem. So let's talk about the Flutter state management a bit and adding a little bit of architectural thinking to it. So in fact, well, the idea of the talk came to my head a few months ago, where we had this project where we developed, a lot of features, and then we started with one state management solution from the native one, and then we moved on to another one and another one, and then I leveled up to like some kind of position as named as solution architect, or I became a software architect first and then solution architect. And then I learned quite a lot about architecture. And then I thought that, oh, if I knew this stuff before, then perhaps I could have made some better decisions. And today I'm going to share those things with you. Or talk about architectural thinking. We're going to talk about state management, particularly in Flutter, other options, how we can add characteristic architecture characteristic to it, and then at the end of the day decide about what we should do. I was introduced very nicely, but again, let me introduce myself. My name is Majid. I'm based in Oslo, a GDE for Flutter and Dart, as well as organizer of Flutter Vikings and Flutter community and a bunch of other things for Flutter community. I'm also head of DevRel at Invertase, so a company that is doing open source software. Especially, we are doing these days amazing stuff for Flutter community. You keep an eye on my profile and Invertase for amazing updates soon. And you can find me on internet with this handler. I will share that again at the end of the talk. So let's go through architectural thinking. Well, everything that I'm saying right now, in fact, is coming from this book. So the architectural thinking is, well, let's go back one more time. As this book is saying, the architectural thinking is about like thinking with a purpose. Well, what does it mean? Like it's just like thinking how the best articulate a complex issue and solve a problem or make it difficult decision, and this is the way that architects usually thinks. And it's funny because, well, based on three main important things that I learned from this book, I strongly recommend you to look at this book and read this book. We're gonna go through the architectural trade-off. Every like this is exactly what is going through an architect or software architect all the time. In fact, understanding, analyzing, and let's say recognizing all of the trade-off associated with those problems that you have, and even solutions, it's very important. And in a head of an architect, everything has a trade-off. If you can't find it, it means you don't see it yet. So, and there is also another thing in this book that is mentioned, that in software architecture, then business drive it's an important role. It has an important role, for software architects. In fact, I added team drive here because we'll scale it down to team, not just particularly for the entire business. So the importance of these business drivers and, translating them to an architecture concerns is a very important thing. Like you'll see later in this talk that we're talking about different state management, but we're also thinking about like what team says, right? What is the driver behind those, team decisions or team members, thinkings. These are also important things that we should take into account. And lastly, the breadth of knowledge. An architect should always have or maintain a depth of a certain knowledge. For example, I'm pretty good at Flutter, pretty good at cloud things, and so on and so forth. And also keep the knowledge so wide, like a breadth of knowledge is an important thing. You should know things that you don't know, or we'll get to that very soon. So I have an example here for you about the trade-off. So, well, we're going to talk about these airplanes. It's funny to see that, well, recently when, again, we have all these COVID stuff, all COVID restrictions lifted again, I had the chance to travel several times, and I was again thinking about like, oh, why these, airplanes or aircrafts have these engines most of the time under the, wings. In fact, this is very common. This is the most common layout that we see today, right? But like, is it the best? That's the things we're gonna figure out right now. There are also other airplanes that they have engine on top, and some others that, they have embedded. But the question comes like, which one is better? Like, why most of the time underneath, not on top or not embedded? So I had a little bit of research here, and I found out that, in fact, there are, well, a lot of reasons, for having the engines underneath. Like one of those reasons is it seems like the safety of the engines when they are underneath is much better, or like it's safer, let's say. And because it's like further from the cabin or where the like passenger seats. And there's another thing into that is like the structural strength, which means when you have these engines underneath, it gives you this, ability to attach more engines, sometimes two engines or even more, or even bigger engines. compared to when you have it on top, and also the maintenance costs. Like, it seems, again, based on my research, the maintenance of these engines when they are under the wings are quite lower, where because it's like closer to ground, easier to access. Well, okay, we have all of these, good reasons to attach these engines underneath, but there are also other things that we should take into account when it comes to those engines. For example, it seems like it's a bit costly having those engines underneath because they have different aerodynamic, and they have like different low speed handling characteristic stuff, and also it just adds up a little bit more consumption, like the fuel consumption higher, and that is way more costlier, it seems. And also, because it's closer to the ground, it just absorbs like so many dust, and the lifespan of the engine seems to be a little bit shorter. So having said all of this, then now the question is, then is having these engines, like having these engines under the knees of the wings, is it better or worse? Like, which one is better, like having underneath, on top, or embedded, or other ones? Well, the answer always from an architecture perspective, comes with these two words. It depends. Like, it really depends. So if you are going to take into account a commercial, airplane that is like having a lot of passengers like on board, then perhaps you should take into account safety and maybe having those quick maintenance. So then probably you should have those engines underneath. Or depends on even the situation, like where these aircrafts are going to take off and land. So this is also important. So that really depends, right? That is a boring answer that you usually hear from an architect. But we're going to get to this. Why? Then how then you make a decision? Another thing that I mentioned, it was the technical breadth, right? So there are things that you definitely know, and probably you are very expert on that. And this is like the top of the pyramid. I know it very well, and I'm just very expert on that. There are things that probably you don't know that you don't know, and that's the things you need to try to shrink those, things that you don't know, and try to understand them, try to learn them, at least keep yourself up to date. There are many ways that you can do that. You can subscribe to different newsletters, at least expose yourself to the topics that you are going to learn more about it and make decisions about it. You don't need to be expert. You just need to know. I want to actually give you an example, and that is this term. Well, I usually ask it in an in-person conference, and I don't think you can you can raise your hand right now. But tell me in the chat. We have someone moderating the chat right now. Tell me if you know what is triple pattern or segmented state pattern. Just send your, like, write in the comment. Let me know if you know. If no one is writing anything right now, then here is the thing. This is the one that I mentioned about breadth of knowledge. If you expose yourself to different newsletters, to different, parts, try to keep up to date yourself with documentation, you perhaps have seen this option under Flutter documentation about state management. And that's the last one that was recently added. So that's what I say about breadth of knowledge. Let's now talk about Flutter state management. We learned about those stuff that architects usually go through, and now we're going to apply that to Flutter state management. First of all, then, why state management is like, we can consider state management like a complex topic because it just involves everything. So state usually is very hard. And if it wasn't hard, you wouldn't restart your computer when you don't know what's going on with your computer, right? So you're restarting your laptop because the state is in some stage that you don't know what's going on, and that you need to restart to just reset everything, right? It's a very complex topic and very also subjective, depends on who is going to talk about that, right? I had an example here. I wanted to create an application, like this is my MJ Coffee app, which I started to build this application for training purposes. And I always use that for all of my YouTube tutorials and courses and workshops. So I actually, and also I wanted to show this to like one of our stakeholders to show like how good is Flutter and how fast we can develop with Flutter. So it's a pretty simple application. A couple of pages, menu pages, detail pages, add to cart. We have like login. As you see, not very complex. State is in place. First thing that it came to my mind was like, okay, how should I manage this state inside the application? When I started the application, I thought that maybe I should keep this state per screen. But sometimes I also need to keep like one place and share it across the screen, right? There are different ways to do it. Or should I always keep everything in one place and share it? That might be a little bit simpler. Well, I don't know yet. It really depends what I want to do. And you see in the next few slides how I made my decision about a solution, a state management solution for this application. But before that, let me quickly go through the states. In fact, in Flutter, we are talking about two types of state. Depends on who is going to use this state. If it's only one single widget using Flutter state, then that's usually what we call it a formal state. And that state will not leak outside of that widget, just particularly for that widget, right? And when you are sharing a state across different widgets or all widgets, then that is something that we call app state. Usually, the complexity is around app state, right? So by looking at official documentation, I realized that we have too many options, at least recommended on the official documentation. And if I want to add or spice it up a little bit, so I can find even more state management. So that is not even very up to date right now. But a friend of mine from community, Mike, he usually like generates these kind of charts, and it shows me very nice indication of like what's going on in each area. And this is for state management. We have top 30 Flutter state management. Well, we have probably more, but these are top 30. I'm not going to go through all of them, of course, but there must be a way that I should narrow this down. It's very hard for me to choose. Is it good that I just go and then just say I will choose X because it's just mentioned everywhere? Probably not, right? As an architect, then you need to think a little bit more differently. So you need to follow up on different solutions, not just following the articles and promotions. So the first thing I could do was I could narrow down these Flutter state management into 3 sections. That by itself gives me some indications. So we have some state management or packages that are based on Flutter features, like provider. Or provider by itself is not a state management, but by a combination of change notifier stuff and river pod, and these are the things that you can definitely think of it like as built on top of Flutter features. You have reactive programming base state management based on those, like Mobex and BLoC, Qubit. These are the ones that are usually consuming a lot of streams and, following the reactive programming approach. And then you have some kind of functional programming based, like Redux and Sync Redux and, similar packages. Okay, that is good. So for now, with this category, then perhaps I can, go through those packages and say, oh, maybe my application uses a lot of a stream. I need real-time, data, then I'm going to go with X. Otherwise, I'll go with that. But it's still not very solid, I believe. So we need to add a little bit more to this to decide afterwards. So I added with the discussion to our team and asking all of the team members, we decided to add a couple of more criteria to narrow down this list, at least to a few of them. We said the package must be probably widely used. And this is the way that I said in the beginning. So we need to have like team drives as well. We need to have like a good documentations, maybe a code coverage above 70%. If the package is not tested or that solution, then how come that I should trust that, right? Or I want a package that only does one thing, and that's state management or nothing else. Well, maybe a dependency injection is a nice to have, but not necessarily. And I'm looking for like an active repository, right? If we look back to those state management solutions and maybe on the recommended page, we can now narrow down our list to a few, maybe 5 or 6 options based on this. Okay? Oh, that's good. But before telling you what I want to compare, I have to mention a chart here, a table that usually you'll see architects try to create. What is that? So they try to match the language between the domain concerns, the domain experts, like, for example, your product owner, and also the developers, something in the middle. So then you have a language. So, for example, architects usually say scalability or agility. The agility words are very popular among architects, right? But then they try to kind of map that to a language that other people can also understand. When you say simplicity, what does it mean? Well, it means we want to quickly pick it up, no learning curves perhaps, and we just want to develop something very fast with that, right? Or in the language of domain experts, that means times and budgets, right? So when we are doing something very quickly in the team without wasting so much time on learning, then definitely that's some kind of like a saving time and of course a budget, right? Because we're saving time of humans in the team that are costly. Or in fact, like, for example, some people say agility or testability. Does it come with too many does it come with too many code generation? Is it hard to test? Does it come with kind of dev tools or a good documentation for all different scenarios of testing? That can be translated to like dev satisfaction. If we choose this package, it actually makes our devs productive, or it actually helps us to quickly develop. It makes us agile, and also testability goes higher, so that the chance that we lose some bugs is lower, or stuff like that. So that can be translated in a way. So creating all of those characteristics and translating them to different languages. And in fact, by doing that, now I am able to choose some of these characteristics and start comparing my state management based on the different criteria that I mentioned in the previous slide, and then see which one is better for my package. The first option is, the built-in feature. You have set a state and stateful widget under your hand, and you don't need any package. So in fact, if you want to go with the chart, with the characteristic, we have simplicity and productivity and maybe adaptability. Like, in fact, like developers can quickly adapt it because it's just built in. You need to learn it first thing in Flutter, right? You don't need to just do anything else. And it makes you very agile. But on the other hand, if app is growing very fast, you have like too many pages to share even states. And in fact, if you have like states in a very low widgets in the widget tree and you want to pass something up, lifting down of these states might be very complex and makes your code a little bit like not very readable or maybe hard to maintain. So those like characteristic goes lower for sure. And so, well, but I came up with some kind of suggestion, says maybe this is a good actually solution for ephemeral state. Then if it's only one place, then you can quickly do that in that place and you don't need to share anything anywhere else. Then perhaps you can do that there. So, and maybe good for prototyping, demoing, and if you don't have a complex hierarchy of widgets, then perhaps it's a good thing to do or use. So one good thing about the set state is that you're not dependent on anyone or anything. It's just built into the Flutter. So you are always safe to upgrade, to the newest version. You have provider and change notifier based on my criteria, I chose provider and change notifier. However, and the author of provider, Remy, he's now my colleague, by the way. So he told me that he doesn't want to suggest provider anymore to anyone. The better everyone probably should consider using Riverpod instead, because Riverpod in fact is provider 2 perhaps, or like a better version of provider. So therefore I will skip that because I made this slide before I talked to him. So I don't even consider this anymore. But then Riverpod comes in place. Very nice package, very well thought. Remy has learned from all of those mistakes that probably you found also on providers and fix those, and comes with better support, dev tools, documentation, and so on and so forth. And pretty simple to use. However, compared to set state, so my base now is set state, the built-in feature. It's not like really simple. Then there are some learning curves. You need to learn some stuff. Of course, the package, once you learn them, it makes you so productive. But because all developers from different levels requires to adopt it differently, so the adaptability then goes a little bit lower probably. That's even my opinion, by the way. So maybe your team has a different opinion. So if you have a team of like all senior expert, then you have different opinion compared to a team has like 2 junior, one media, and then 1 expert, right? So that's a little bit different. So, but my conclusion was like, this is the chart. I said that probably good for most application because it covers most scenarios. It has a nice DI, dependency injection, and but if you probably use like reactive applications, like maybe you should consider something else. Maybe not. Maybe it works, but to my opinion, maybe it's good for application without reactive approach. So then we have BLoC. Here, I don't mean a BLoC as a pattern. I mean BLoC as a package. So Flutter BLoC, created by Felix. So this is what I mean here when I say BLoC. So again, I started to compare that a little bit. So is it simple compared to others? Well, perhaps not, because you need to learn BLoC pattern. Well, you don't know BLoC? Don't worry about it. We have an expert of BLoC. So next talk is Carlo talking about BLoC. So you will learn about BLoC so much. I guarantee. So then, is it easy? Well, perhaps compared to others, not. But well, it's a good tooling, very mature. People from team may adopt it quickly, but not that quickly. Depends on the level of seniority. It makes you agile, but not maybe that much, because you need to understand reactive programming and streams, and might be a little bit complex to work with. But but the scalability and for the application and testability is fantastic. Comes with a lot of things that covers big applications, especially with reactive programming pattern, and very nice package. So moving to MobX, again, from that category of reactive programming, very nice. Again, a little bit, learning curves, because you need to understand MobX, like how things works, like events and all the side effects and stuff. So maybe it's not really adaptable, because the seniority, based on the seniority level of your team members, it might be a little bit challenging to get everyone quickly up to speed with this package. But however, it's a very nice package, very, very, very nice when it comes to productivity and managing your state inside the medium applications, perhaps, based on my experience. And if you also want to have some kind of fun with code generation, that also provides you code generation and stuff. However, the author of this package, I have a video on my YouTube channel with the author of MobX, and he told me that it's better not to use code generation, because they're trying to catch up with new features of Dart that is nice in the future. So, and Redux is, well, from another category. So another category, functional approach. So then you have, I've been in teams that most of them were web developers and very familiar with these functional approaches of web development, especially Redux. And then this is a great probably package for those who wants to like have this category inside their application, and they're very familiar with the pattern. So, and well, but depends on your team. It might not be very adaptable and make you very agile, because it comes with some implications that's not very nice for like purely mobile developers. And then we have Gedit, like a dependency injection service locator. By the way, I also have another video with the author of Gedit on my YouTube channel. Together with Gedit mixin makes it like a perfect state management. But still, it's a good thing that especially if you're not a big fan of context in Flutter, so if you want to avoid that and just go a little bit simpler, but might not be very scalable, and might makes your application very tightly coupled. It depends on how you architect it, but it's a very common thing that I see, but it's a very nice combination of state management for most application without reactive programming approaches, especially like small to medium applications. All right. So now we come up with this set of comparison. We have a chart of characteristics for each of these state management. Fantastic. So now I need to decide, I need to give weight to these characteristics, and then all of my, findings about this state management. So based on this, I decided for my application and my team, we decided to go for simplicity and agility. So we want to do something very fast with no learning curves, which makes our, like probably everyone knows in the team, and we wanted to do everything very, very fast. Now you have a chance to tell me in our comments, which one of these do you think, based on what I said so far, and also the two characteristics that I chose, is the one that I choose for my application, MJ Coffee app? So you just name it in the comment, and I'll look at the comments shortly. I'll give the answer after next slide. I'll give you some time to choose what I have decided to choose, to write what I have decided to choose. Let's go for the next one. All of these things that I mentioned has two more important consideration. always and always think about your team and discuss within your team what are the important things. So in fact, well, you might come up with some state management and everyone in the world says this is great, but then your team says, oh, we are more comfortable with this one, and why not using this one? Because at the end of the day, all of them are solving one problem, and that's the state management, right? So it's important that how your team adapt with that. And again, take into consideration that project evolves. In fact, in one of my projects 4 years ago, we had like a WebSocket things, real-time application, an IoT service. We used a lot of streams and, real-time data in the application. In the beginning, we started using another approach, which was very famous at that time, scoped, and I believe some developers now, Flutter developers, know about that scoped model and stuff like that. But then we started to realize after months of development and growing the project, we realized that, oh, that's not really scalable with, our application. There's nothing wrong to go back and revise your, decision and take a look at what you have decided before and maybe reprioritize your characteristic again and choose something else that is working, because now you know your project much better. However, that is a little bit costly, of course, right? And I'll tell you how you can avoid that cost, like switching between state management. But let's take a pause and take a look at the chats. For those who said that I chose Riverpod or BLoC, you're absolutely not correct. I chose set state because I had only 6 pages and no complex state management. And I had to do it in 2 days. So there was no reason to use any other package in my team, rather state management, set state. That's the simplest things that I could do, and I chose it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. So take into account. Also, think about it. It's also very fine to use set state together with another solution, like having 2 state management in one application. It's absolutely fine. So because for different purposes, you choose different packages or different patterns. That's the thing I want to mention right now. So here is the things. When you architect your application, you probably come up with some kind of pattern, right? And there are some patterns, of course, like you have infrastructure. If you are going with layers, let's say, so you have a layer that is just maintaining the infrastructure, and you have application layer that that's probably somewhere that you're going to use state management. Or you have presentation layer that is just dealing with presenting your data, right? Let's say if I put everything in a presentation application layer, when I separate my concern, like my state management concern, into a layer, it is way easier like to replace it later with something else. That is a very important thing that I wanted to do, please, before you continue doing an application. So because it makes it way easier to maintain your application later, replace one layer just with another solution. So you don't really tie up your application with one thing. And that is absolutely important in building an application. So let's move on to a summary page. In this session, I talked about architectural thinking, mostly about a couple of important factors and how architect thinks, and how they decide. And we went through some Flutter state management, some important ones, at least based on my criteria. We talked about characteristic, how we can translate different, languages between different stakeholders. And at the end of the day, based on those findings and criteria and team drives and projects and, the understanding that we have, all of those, we made a decision about our solution. So now I want to ask you a question. If you want to choose one of those state management for your application, which one do you think is the best? You have 5 seconds right now. Write in the comment which one is the best. I want to see what you write. I hope you tell me the correct answer. So let's count. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I really love when people says it depends. That was my purpose of these talks. So if you understood this, I am quite glad and happy. That really depends. You don't need to say one package. You can just make a decision for all project. You need to understand a few things before you make your decisions. So that was the most important things that I wanted to tell you. So maybe later, as Ian said, maybe I should create a package says it depends and involve like all of those state management and provide an interface, a public interface. That's a good idea. So, well, with that said, thank you very much listening to me. It's right on time, 40 minutes. I had a timer here. So if you want to reach out later for these slides, this is the link for the slides, slides.com/myhandler, MHA Daily. You can also find me on social media with, again, the exact same handler. You can search my name on also all of the social media. I'm pretty accessible. You can find me anywhere. If you have later any question, I'm happy to answer that, whether in this chat or this show, or maybe on social media. You can send me private messages. Thank you very much. And I will leave the stage to you, Ian.
Cool. Thank you, Majid. That was great. I think my camera's zoomed in. There we go. Yeah, if somebody did make that depends state management package, everyone would be recommending it.
Exactly.
So yeah, I don't think we got many questions. So what we could do is, like, if you do have a question, if you ask it in the chat, we can either bring it onto our Slack channel, or we can ask Majid halfway through the talk. Sorry, the next talk. So if you're okay, what we could do is we could move on to Carlo if he's ready. I'll bring him up onto the stage.
Hello.
There we go.
Hi.
Cool. I'll say goodbye to Majid, but thank you very much for doing your talk. It was a pleasure having you.
Bye, Majid.
And we'll move on to Carlo. Cool. Here we go. I'll leave you to it, Carlo. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, after what Majid said, I have to say that BLoC is the best state management ever. Of course, I'm joking because, as someone said to me, it depends. This was pretty much a fun meme that we had in our community after we talked with Majid, because really, it depends on how you intend to build your application. So, what is exactly a state management? When we create a new application, we have a lot of things going under the hood. And we need the user to retain what he is doing. In order to do so, we need to manage the state of the application, because as we saw in the previous talk from Majid, in Flutter, the UI is a function of the state. So whatever the user puts some item in the cart, it may be logouts and they go back to the application. He should be able to find out what he was doing. This was an example of a most complex state, but also we have some other kind of state, like for example, when you tap on a button, the button should react to the user action. We have two types of state, the ephemeral state and the app state. The ephemeral state is the one most simple when, for example, I say the button interacting with the user touch. It represents the current UI of the application, and it can be contained on a single widget. This state doesn't need to be stored because, for example, you don't want to store the information of the user is currently pressing the button, so make the inkwell animation, and doesn't need to be serialized. One common ephemeral state management is simply the stateful widget. Basically, when we have a stateful widget, we are just handling an ephemeral state. In this case, to change the interface, we just need to call the set state and modify the value we want to update. In a case of a counter, for example, we may have a button to increase the counter. We simply call the set state and increase the counter number. Then we have a more complex state management that is the up state. The up state needs to be stable because it serves to manage the user, for example, current page that is C. So if we close the application and we reopen the application, maybe we need to route the user to the previous page he was seeing. And sometimes it needs to be shared across application. For example, when we have a user and we manage a cart, maybe if the user log in another account in the same account in another phone, it needs to retain this information. Or, for example, it can be the state of articles in a news app. So when you read the article, I should tell the user that is already read, and so on. Let's go ahead. Why I choose BLoC? BLoC is basically my favorite state management for medium and complex project. I choose BLoC because it's simple enough and easy to understand, because it relies mostly on 3 components and a couple of UI widgets that I will show you later. It can be scalable for simple and complex widgets because you can maybe even handle a simple button animation, but it is not where it shines. But it can be scaled to a very complex example, like handling all the user information and give you the opportunity to retrieve those in all or your application. It's predictable because being based on streams, you always know the next state what will be, and it is highly testable because you can even test a single block behavior with the test suite. So let's see how the BLoC is structured. We have 3 type of components. We have our UI, and it communicates with the blocks with state and events. And then we have a data layer. In order to maintain a complex state management like the cart example, we need to implement a data layer that we will not see during this talk. Before talking about BLoC, we need to understand what is a stream. A stream is a continuous evolving stream of data. In Dart, we define a method that returns a stream with the async asterisk keyword. And as you can see, the return of this method will be a stream. In this case, I give the streams the type of int in order to manage a counter for an application. The difference between a common method that have the return the streams as a yield keyword. Anytime we call the yield, the streams will emit its new value, and we can listen to said stream in order to see the new value every time it updates. For example, if we want to create a simple countdown widget, we can simply create a stream that basically from an input number return yield, not return, after awaiting 1 second, the current value -1 for each iteration. This way, if we, for example, let's say we call countdown 10, we will have a yield of 10 after 1 second, then 9, then 8, and so on. To listen a stream in Flutter, we can use the stream builder, where basically we provide on the stream parameter a stream, in this case our countdown method, and we have a builder method where basically we just return the value of the snapshot, that is the current value of the stream. With data, we can take the value as int, because it's what the stream contains. What change when we use BLoC to do the same? First of all, we have a BLoC class that abstract event as input and yield new state on change. As I said, this is our BLoC, and this is how we write a BLoC in Flutter. Basically, we extend the class BLoC and we pass two generic type. The first type is the event. It can be anything, and I decided to use a custom class. You will see later why. In the map event to state, we will have the type of the event passed as an input, so we can check that. And the second is the value of the state. I used an int because I wanted to create a counter application. So what is important here is that we provide an initial state as the super, and we provide, and in our map to event to state will return a stream of our type. Let's go to the event. Basically, the event is how the UI communicate with the BLoC to trigger some kind of change. As I said before, it can be any kind of class. So let's go with our counter event. I just defined a class called counter event because in this way I can extend said class in order to have different naming. For example, I can have an increment counter in order to increment then in our BLoC the counter, and a decrement counter. Why? Because when we are in the map event to state method, we can inside check the type of the counter event. If it is increment counter, let's increment. If it is decrement counter, let's decrement. This can be basically everything because, for example, imagine we have article state manager. We can have loading article event that extend article events, where we can show the loading, and then we can have the loaded article event where we show the articles. As I said, the increment can be checked because it's a counter event extension, and the same for the decrement. After having an event, what should happen? Every time an event reach the BLoC handle it using the map event to state, and it should yield a new state. This will cause the UI to update its state. As I said, the state in this case is a type of int. We have the state returned as a stream of int, and we simply yield the new state because the state is currently a variable of the BLoC, of the base BLoC, so we can get the value and modify it. We should return the new state by remembering that BLoC doesn't emit the same state twice. So if we try to emit the same state, in order to optimize, it will be not yielded again. In BLoC 720, we have another way to handle the map event to state. Instead of using the map event to state, we can use the on event mode. So basically, in the initializer of our BLoC, we just define a function called on and the type of the event, in this case increment and decrement, and we just emit with the emit keyword the new state. Then we need to translate these in UI, because since now we just handle the events, emitted new state, but we need to listen this state in our interface. We have two parts of the process: who provide the BLoC and who let the user compose the UI. Let's see for first the how we can listen in the UI for the BLoC change. We have the BLoC builder. The BLoC builder is a widget that basically provide a simple function builder to manage the new context. We have the definition of the type. So when we create a BLoC builder, we should provide the type of the BLoC and the type of the state in order to be found higher on the tree, and the builder function. In the builder function, we have two parameters: the context and the state, that will be our value that we defined in the BLoC builder declaration. So in this case, it will be an int, and we can just use that. Every time the value of the int change, we will have a build again. So in this case, when we use our counter, every time the state change, the text will show the new number. Sometime we may need to not rebuild the widget, but just listen to what's happened. One case, it can be, for example, a connection manager. If I have an application where the user can be online or offline, maybe I don't want to rebuild the UI, but for example, if you lose the connection, you may want to see a small banner, a small snack bar that tells you you are now offline or you are now online. In this case, I imagined a connection block with a state of Boolean. What changed between a BLoC builder and a BLoC listener? In the BLoC builder, you have two parameters: the listener and the child. The child will be the content that will be rendered. These won't be rebuilt every time the state change. The difference with the builder is this one. Basically, the text in this case will not be rebuilt when the state is updated. In this case, we have the listener. The listener is behave like the builder in the BLoC builder, but doesn't need a return of a widget. Doesn't expect a return of a widget. It's just a void function where we have the context and the new state. We can use the context, for example, to show a dialogue or to show a snack bar, or even, for example, we can have a block listener that wrap our wall application. When the user log out, it will trigger the listener, and the listener will navigate our user outside the application to the login screen, wherever he is currently. We may have some particular case. For example, we can have the necessity of using both the listener and the builder. In this case, we can totally wrap the two. And in this case, we can have basically a block listener that show us a snack bar telling you that the value changed. And inside, as a child, we can have a block builder. This is totally fine. This can be done anytime, but we have a better way to do that. Instead of using the block listener and the block builder, we can use a block consumer. The block consumer combines the two, and with a single definition, we have our block consumer with the type, and inside we have the listener and the builder. This way, we don't need to nest too many widgets if we need the functionality of both. We can even optimize the content of the number of time we trigger rebuild or relistening. Basically, we have two functions that one for the block builder, that is the parameter build when, and the block listener condition, that is a function for the listen when parameter of the block listener. These provide the previous and the current state, and we can decide if this is worth to update the UI or not. We provide the function inside the build when and the listen when, and we return true when we want to change the UI or trigger the listener. One of the example can be you have a user block that manage all the user information, but you have several values, and for example, you have the username, the gender, the age, and so on. But you want to rebuild only the field that changed. In this case, instead of having a lot of block, one for the username, one for the user gender, you have a single block with the user information, and each field will just build when the, for example, let's say the username, when previous username is different from current username. Of course, the block consumer have the opportunity to add both parameters, so the listen when and the build when. Let's go to the most interesting part, how we should provide block. Right now, I showed you how to listen to the change, but when you listen to the change, you actually listen to a block that should be above your widget. To do so, basically, we have, for example, our counter widget that inside have the block builder. The most immediate case and easy way to provide a block, it's simply to use the block parameter of the block builder, and we provide our block. This is the most easy way, but probably not the most used, because these will be specific only for that block builder, and maybe we may need something more complex. Maybe we need the block to be shared by several widgets. So in order to do so, we must use a block provider. The block provider is a widget that have two parameters. A create parameters, that is a function with a context input that should return our block. And then the child. Any child of this block builder, this block provider, sorry, will listen to the block provider, to the block that we provided. So in this case, any child of counter widget will start with the counter block 0 that we provided in the previous slide. Let's go forward again. And now let's see how to send events. As we saw, it starts with the block. This is what we will listen. Every time the block change will trigger a new state. The state will update the UI accordingly, but from the UI, we need somehow to trigger an event when we want the block to update its state. And this can be done several times in your application. For example, adding an item to the cart will add the item to the cart block, and the block will emit a new state, and that state will update the UI. As I said, we have a way to provide our block. For example, in this graph, you can see that we have a parent widget. Then on the right side, we will have a counter block and some widget under that. In order to retrieve an instance of a specific block, we should use the block provider of and the type, providing the context. This way, if I have the counter block, the block provider of counter block can be called by any widget outside said block. As I said, any child of the block provider can access the counter block instance. Of course, this is not true for the widgets that are not child of said block. So calling block provider of counter block from the left side of our tree will give you a null result. For example, let's have a widget that we use for adding a new, for increment the counter. Let's have a simple elevated button, and on pressed callback, we simply call the block provider of context dot add and our event. Do you remember the increment counter class? I simply call the dot add and send the instance of my event. This way, what happened is that in my button, I call the block provider of add, and this action will go back up to the tree until the first instance of the counter block. Then the block will yield the new state, and any widget inside will update itself either by the block builder, for example, for incrementing the actual number, or with a block listener to show a snack bar with the new information. Again, the widget on the left will be not afflicted in any way from this change. We have some common error that you can encounter when dealing with block with the block package. Basically, the first and most common one is that the block builder or listener is not a child of the correct block. As I said, you need to be under the block provider. One most common case is that we directly call inside the same widget the block provider of context of the block provider, but we have to scorporate in another widget because the context we are using is actually the context that is provided by the build method that is containing the block provider. In any case, we need to we may fix that by using a builder, not block builder, a simple builder that will give another context that is this time enclosed inside the block provider. Another common pitfall is the same state is never yelled twice. In the example I showed to you, it's pretty easy to understand because, okay, I yelled 5, my counter will show 5. If I yelled 5 again, this will not change the interface. Easy. But in some cases, it's not so immediate to find. Because, for example, if we have some complex class and we didn't manage the equality check, for example, the user information block, where we have the user information as a state, if I don't manage the equality check to tell the class that if the user name is different, then this is a different class, we will have the equality if we don't change the instance, for example, but we simply modify the value. Or list, for example, if we simply check list equals, it will be equals if it is the same instance, because we are not really checking the content inside, but rather the same instance. So even if the values are different, the instance will be the same. And nested widget can only see the nearest block. Do you remember the graph I showed you before? Let's imagine that between our block builder and our green widget, we have another counter block. When we tap the elevated button, we go up until the first instance of counter block. So if we have another counter block between the two, it will stop there and will not update the rest of the interface. Said so, I finished my talk. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to speak at Flutter Scotland. And if you have any question, I'm here for you.
Cool, thank you, Carlo. Sorry, my camera is really zoomed in for some weird reason.
No
that
worries.
was a great.
I can come closer if you want.
Yeah, so that we can match. Yeah, I'll maybe leave it just for a couple of minutes just to see if anyone has any kind of questions for you. But yeah, that was a really excellent talk. Oh yeah.
Meanwhile, I invite my co-speaker here.
What was his name again?
He is my personal dash because you can find me as a hot droid online, and it is hot reload. It's a fun joke for Flutter developers.
Yeah, always reloading the hats. Excellent. Yeah, so someone sees that I've zoomed in for dramatic effect. All intentional, I'm sure. Yeah, so if we don't have any questions, we can see if anyone has some later on and they can ask it in the Slack channel, and I'm sure we can reach out to you, Carlo, and see if we can get those answered. But oh wait, did we have one? Yeah, so we've got one from Guy. I can maybe put it on the screen.
I have to see that. My bad, I never checked Trogly qubit. I only stick with basic block. Basically, it should be a simpler version of the block. But don't trust me too much on this because, again, I never studied qubit as I should have.
Excellent.
So in my personal experience, you should always use BLoC instead of a qubit. But of course, is the wrong answer.
Do we have any other ones? I think that might be it. Yep. Guys saying okay. Cool. Yeah, so what we could do, we could move on to the last part of the event, but thank you. Oh no, do we have another one? Yep, we got another one, sorry.
Of course, there are a lot. There is even one on flutter.dev page. So in the official Flutter page, you have a cookbook section where you have several tutorials, and there is also one on BLoC. Or you can search for BLoC library, Flutter BLoC library, and there is a website that show you easily what you can do with BLoC.
Yeah, there's a lot of great resources out there. I think even some of the very good ventures, because they made some of the BLoC, or they made the BLoC library, or Felix did. There's a lot of good sample code from their GitHub as well. That's really good to look at. And I think there's even some online tutorials by ResoCoder, and he does some BLoC tutorials as well. Yeah, I've used them personally. So those are really good. We've got another question.
Not sure about which company uses BLoC on a production level that may be of your interest, but in my company we use that and we are pretty much satisfied with the behavior. Our application it's still not open, so I can't tell you what it really is, but it's really complex, and the power of BLoC is that it's able to scale. So if you have the necessity of having a BLoC on the top of your material application, you can do that, but you can even have BLoCs for page, so above each root, or even above a couple of widgets. So it will scale really well.
Cool. I'll just check the
We
chat.
still didn't found the limit, to be honest.
There's no limit to BLoC. That's what we could say. I don't know if we have any more questions. I think I've tried this before, and then a question just pops up out of nowhere. But yeah, if anyone does have any more questions, I think we've got another one.
Yes, basically, yes, we rely only to BLoC and the occasional set state. If we have some small change that we should do, that is contained only a single widget. For example, an indicator where you scroll a page view and highlights the current page. We use the set state for that, but basically we use the BLoC for anything else.
Cool. I think that's all the questions we have. I know another one will pop up, but if we have any more questions, we could ask them in the Slack, and then we can forward those on to Carlo. But yeah, thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully you come back to Flutter Scotland for another talk someday.
Of course.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Carlo. There we go. And what I'll do is I'll just finish us off on the last part. So we do have another meetup planned for the next, basically in 2 months' time. But we're going to be doing lightning talks from the community. So anything between 5 and 15 minutes. We've got a couple already lined up. But it was just to let everyone know that if you have a talk or if you have an app that you would like to show off, we can do that at the next event. And if you drop inside the Slack channel, I think there's like a presentation kind of channel that you can drop that one in there, and then we can help organize like an order. But we've got a couple already. Not too sure if that one is going to be in person, but I think we would like to make sure that it's a hybrid one so that we have online people as well. So that will be on Monday, the 25th of July, and hopefully we can see you there. But that's us for tonight, and I hope you've enjoyed the talks, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.